Did you really think someone like you could sit in my boardroom? The words hit harder than the silence that followed. Everyone froze, eyes darting between Mr. Reynolds, the senior executive, and the young black woman standing before him. Her name was Aisha Carter. 29 years old, smart, precise, the best data analyst in the firm. Yet in that moment, she wasn't an employee. She was a target. Reynolds smirked. You people are better off taking orders, not giving them. Next time you want a promotion, try learning some manners first. Aisha's hand clenched around the folder she'd spent weeks preparing. The pitch, her pitch, had just been laughed out of the room. Not because it was bad, but because it came from her. Her voice trembled but stood its ground. Sir, the data speaks for itself. This model could increase profits by 12%. Enough, he snapped. You're dismissed. The other executives avoided her gaze, pretending to check their phones. The sound of the glass door closing behind her felt like a slap. As she walked down the long corridor, whispers followed. Maybe she got in through diversity quotas. Typical, trying to act smarter than she is. Every word burned. Every laugh echoed. But what hurt most was the truth she already knew. No matter how good she was, she would always be seen as less. That night, she sat in her small apartment, laptop still open, the presentation glowing in front of her. Every chart, every number, perfect. Yet it didn't matter. In that company, her skin tone weighed more than her credentials. Her mother's voice replayed in her head. Baby, this world won't always clap when you win. Sometimes it'll try to erase your victory before it happens. Aisha stared at the city lights outside her window. Somewhere out there, people were living freely, unjudged. But for her, every step upward felt like walking through fire. The next morning, she returned to work early, hours before anyone else. The building was quiet. She walked past the portraits of white men on the walls, CEOs, founders, legends, and stopped at the empty space reserved for future leaders. She whispered, "One day they'll hang my photo here." Not because they want to, but because they'll have no choice. By noon, an internal email spread across the office. Her project idea had been approved for pilot testing. But at the bottom of the message, the signature read, Project Lead, Andrew Reynolds. Her breath caught. He'd stolen it. The same man who humiliated her had taken credit for her work. Her best friend and co-worker, Malik, found her staring at the screen. "Aisha, you okay?" She smiled bitterly. "He took everything, Malik. My idea, my effort, even my dignity." He leaned closer. "Then take it back." She looked at him, eyes glinting with both pain and determination. "How? By being smarter, louder, and unshakable? Make them regret underestimating you." That night, Aisha began collecting proof. Emails, drafts, timestamps. Every detail that could expose Reynolds for who he truly was. But as she dug deeper, she found something she didn't expect. Hidden files, shady contracts, and a trail of discrimination complaints that had all quietly vanished. Her pulse quickened. "This isn't just about me," she whispered. "This whole company's built on injustice." The lights flickered in her office, and for the first time, fear crossed her mind. But so did purpose. She looked up, her reflection in the dark window staring back. "You wanted to bury me," she said softly. "But you just taught me how to fight." And with that, Aisha Carter, the woman they dismissed, began to rise. By morning, Aisha's exhaustion was hidden beneath calm eyes and a crisp gray suit. No one in the office could tell she'd barely slept, that she'd spent the entire night gathering files, tracing emails and uncovering years of quiet corruption. When Reynolds passed her in the hallway, his smirk returned. "Late night crying over your little failure?" She looked straight at him. "No, sir. Just learning how things really work around here," he laughed, brushing past her. "Be careful, Aisha. Ambition's a dangerous thing when you don't have the skin for it." The words burned, but she didn't flinch. She knew something he didn't. She had his secrets now. Later that day, she went to Malik's desk, whispering, "Meet me in the archive room after lunch." "Don't tell anyone," he frowned. "What's going on?" "You'll see." At 1 o'clock, they met in the quiet room filled with dusty files and forgotten binders. Aisha opened her laptop, showing him a folder labeled Truth. Inside were copies of reports, deleted emails, and a spreadsheet that revealed a pattern. Qualified black employees had been consistently denied promotions for years. Reynolds' name appeared again and again in the approval chains. Malik's jaw tightened. This is enough to blow the company open, she nodded. If I go public, I'll lose my job. Maybe worse. But if I stay silent, they'll just keep doing it. Malik hesitated. Then what's the plan? Aisha leaned closer. We don't fight their power. We use it against them. She began drafting a new presentation, one that looked like a quarterly progress report full of data and charts. But embedded inside were the numbers she'd found, coded as performance metrics. It was subtle enough that only she would know what it really exposed. She submitted it for the upcoming executive meeting, the same one Reynolds would lead. The following week, the conference room buzzed with tension. Top managers filled the seats, including the CEO, Ms. Whitman, a woman known for her sharp mind and colder heart. Reynolds strutted in confidently. Morning, team. I'll be presenting our growth strategy based on my latest analytics. Aisha sat quietly in the corner, pretending to take notes. Her heart pounded. Every slide he showed was her work, her formula, her design. But now, he was walking into a trap he didn't even see. Then came the final slide, the one she had planted. Ms. Whitman squinted at the numbers. Mr. Reynolds, this is strange. Why are certain employee groups underperforming despite higher evaluations? This chart doesn't make sense. Reynolds froze. Well, that's just a formatting issue. Aisha stood up. If I may, ma'am, it's not formatting. Those numbers reveal a consistent pattern of bias in departmental promotions. I ran the data myself. The room fell silent. Reynolds' voice cracked. That's absurd. She's lying. Aisha met his eyes. Am I? She tapped her laptop, projecting the original audit trail. Emails with his initials. Approval rejections. Timestamps. Everything. Gasps rippled across the table. Ms. Whitman's expression darkened. Mr. Reynolds, step outside! Reynolds turned red. This is a setup. Now! He stormed out, slamming the door so hard it echoed. Aisha stood still, her voice steady but soft. This isn't about revenge, ma'am. It's about respect. For everyone who's been overlooked, unheard, or erased. I'm just the one who finally said something. Ms. Whitman looked at her for a long moment. You took a big risk, Aisha nodded. Silence was a bigger one. The CEO leaned back. Leave the rest to me. But deep inside, Aisha knew this wasn't over. Men like Reynolds didn't go down quietly. And as she left the room, she could already feel eyes following her, not just from the company, but from something bigger than she expected. She didn't know it yet, but the storm she'd unleashed was just beginning. The next few days felt strange. The office that once ignored her now stared every time she walked by. Some eyes carried admiration, others fear, and a few, quiet resentment. Aisha tried to ignore it all, but she could feel the tension crawl under her skin. By Friday, Reynolds' desk was cleared out, his nameplate gone. HR called it a suspension pending investigation, but everyone knew what that meant. He was finished, or so she thought. That evening, as she packed her things, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Aisha Carter, a deep voice said. You should watch where you dig. She froze. Who is this? Just someone who knows that people who rise too fast often fall harder. The line went dead. Her heart pounded, fingers trembling as she set the phone down. She knew that voice. Reynolds. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something darker. That night, as she walked to her car, she noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The engine was running, headlights dim. Her instincts screamed. She turned and walked quickly to the elevator, pretending not to notice. When she got home, she double-checked the locks twice before sitting by the window. The city glowed outside, 1,000 lights, none of which could make her feel safe. The next morning, she found a letter slipped under her apartment door. No address, just one sentence in bold ink. You think they'll protect you? Wait till you see who's really running this company. She took the letter straight to Malik. He looked at it, eyes narrowing. This means someone else is involved. Maybe higher up. Aisha exhaled shakily. He said I should watch where I dig. Malik, what if this isn't just corporate bias? What if it's corruption? Real corruption? He placed a hand on her shoulder. Then you finish what you started. That night, Aisha couldn't sleep. Her laptop glowed in the dark, the company's internal server open. She searched deeper, old reports, executive transactions, deleted audits. Then she found it. A folder hidden behind layers of encrypted files. Inside, documents showing money being funneled through diversity initiatives that never existed. Signatures from multiple executives, including the CEO, Ms. Whitman. Her stomach dropped. Oh my God. She printed the files, page after page, her printer humming like a ticking clock. She realized Reynolds wasn't just a racist boss. He was part of a system designed to profit from injustice, and she had just exposed its first crack. The next morning, she was called to HR. The woman behind the desk smiled too politely. Aisha, we've had some concerns about your recent activities. What kind of concerns? Unauthorized data access, breach of company property. Aisha's chest tightened. You mean investigating the truth? I mean actions that could result in termination. She almost laughed. So this is how you handle racism, by firing the person who exposes it? The woman avoided eye contact. You should leave your ID at the desk on your way out. Aisha stood there for a long second, the humiliation sinking deep. Then she picked up her bag, her voice calm but sharp. You can take my job, but you can't erase what I found. She walked out of that building, her heart breaking and her spirit burning. For the first time, she had nothing to lose. And sometimes that's when people become unstoppable. That night, as she stared at the stack of papers on her kitchen table, one thought echoed in her mind. They tried to silence me. But now, I'm going to make them listen. Her next move wouldn't be inside the company. It would be public, loud, and impossible to bury. The next morning, the city felt colder. Maybe it was the wind. Or maybe it was the weight of what Aisha was about to do. She sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by files, evidence that could destroy one of the most powerful corporations in America. She knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who'd been shut down, overlooked, and silenced by the same kind of system. She opened her laptop and began typing an email. The subject line read, "The truth about Whitman and Cole Industries." She attached the documents, the financial fraud, the fake diversity programs, the promotion rejections. Then she hesitated, finger hovering over send. Malik's words echoed in her head. Once this goes out, there's no turning back. She took a deep breath. Then let it begin. Click. The email went to every major news outlet in the country. Within hours, her phone exploded with calls and messages. Journalists wanted interviews. Former employees were reaching out, some in tears, saying she was the first person brave enough to speak. But while the world was finally listening, the company moved fast. By noon, their official statement hit the headlines. Whitman and Cole Industries denies all allegations made by a disgruntled ex-employee. These claims are baseless and defamatory. Aisha watched the screen, anger boiling beneath her calm. Disgruntled ex-employee? She whispered. That's how they erase people, with labels, Malik called. They're trying to bury it, Aisha. They've got PR teams spinning lies everywhere. I expected that, she said quietly. But they can't bury the truth forever. That night, she appeared live on a local news broadcast. The host tried to sound neutral. Miss Carter, your claims are serious. Do you have proof? Aisha held up the documents. Every number, every email, every signature is here. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. They used diversity as a mask for discrimination, and I won't let them hide behind it anymore. The clip spread across social media. Millions watched. Some called her brave. Others called her a liar. but no one could ignore her. Meanwhile, in the dark corner office of Whitman and Cole, Ms. Whitman slammed her phone down. "Find out who helped her," she ordered, "and make sure she never works in this industry again." Her assistant hesitated. "Ma'am, if what she's saying is true, this could turn into a federal investigation." Whitman's eyes hardened. "Then we make it not true." The following morning, Aisha woke up to chaos. Her car windows were smashed, her email accounts hacked. Even her landlord received a notice saying she was under financial investigation. They were trying to scare her, to make her crumble. Malik found her that afternoon sitting on a park bench. "You okay?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly. "They're coming for me, Malik. Just like I knew they would. So what now?" Aisha looked out over the city skyline, her voice steady. "Now we fight smarter. If they think I'm alone, they're wrong." Over the next week, former employees began to speak up. One by one, people of color who had faced the same silent injustice came forward. Stories of being denied raises, ignored in meetings, replaced after speaking out. It became a movement. The hashtag #NotTruthAtCole started trending nationwide. Protesters stood outside the building with signs that read, "Respect over racism," and "We stand with Aisha." But behind the support, danger still lurked. Late one night, Malik called her, his voice shaking. "Aisha, I think they're watching me too. Someone followed me home." Her blood ran cold. "Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone." For the first time since this all began, fear crawled back into her heart. Not for herself, but for those standing beside her. She whispered to herself, "They can break my car, my name, my job, but they'll never break the truth." And somewhere in the city skyline, lights glimmered on the Whitman and Cole Tower, bright, proud, and trembling, as if it knew that its empire was starting to crack. The morning headlines were louder than the city itself. "Corporate giant under fire for racial bias." "Whistleblower Aisha Carter sparks national movement." Every channel was talking about her. Every news anchor said her name. But while the world cheered her courage, Aisha knew the fight was far from over. Because behind those glass walls of Whitman and Cole, a darker game was being played. Malik met her at a small diner far from downtown. The place smelled like old coffee and fried eggs, but it was safe. No cameras, no suits. "They're panicking," he said, sliding his phone across the table. "Someone leaked this to me." Aisha looked at the screen, an internal email chain between Ms. Whitman and the board members. "Eliminate all digital traces of Carter's projects. Discredit her credentials. Find inconsistencies in her record. If needed, pursue legal action." Her jaw tightened. "They're trying to erase me." Malik nodded grimly. "They're building a case, saying you falsified data to frame Reynolds." Aisha closed her eyes. Of course. Turn the truth into a lie. But before she could speak, Malik added, "There's more. Look at the names CC'd at the bottom." Her eyes scanned the screen and stopped. Thomas Reed, her former mentor, the man who first hired her, the one who always said she reminded him of his daughter. Her heart sank. "He was supposed to protect me." Malik sighed. "He's not who you think he is. He's on the board, Aisha. And guess who signed every fake diversity fund approval?" She felt her throat tighten. Betrayal cut deeper than hate ever could. So all this time, he was helping them cover it up. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by printouts and open files. Every photo, every number now told a story of deceit, not just from Reynolds, not just from Whitman, but from people she trusted. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." She stared at it for a long moment, then typed back one word: "Try me." The next day, she called a journalist from the Sentinel, a bold newspaper known for taking on corporate power. "I have proof," she said, "not just of bias, of corruption, embezzlement, and cover-ups, but I need protection." The reporter's tone was sharp. We'll give you that. Meet me tomorrow at our office and bring everything." For the first time, Aisha felt a flicker of relief. But fate wasn't going to make it that easy. That night, as she drove home, a black SUV appeared in her rearview mirror. It followed every turn, every light. Her pulse quickened. She sped up. It did too. Then her phone rang again. Same unknown number. "You should have stayed silent, Aisha." Her breath caught. She swerved onto a side street, parked fast, and ran into a nearby building. The SUV slowed outside, waited for a few seconds, then drove off into the dark. Her heart hammered in her chest. She leaned against the wall, whispering to herself, "They're desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." By dawn, she was sitting across from the Sentinel journalist, sliding a thick envelope across the table. "Everything's in here. They stole from the government, lied to investors, and buried employees who spoke out. You publish this, and the world will finally see them for what they are." The reporter nodded slowly. "Once this goes live, there's no hiding. You'll be a hero to some, and a threat to others." Aisha looked straight into his eyes. "I don't want to be a hero. I just want to be free." 2 days later, the article dropped. Front page. "The system inside, racism, fraud, and fear at Whitman & Cole." It exploded online. Protests doubled. Government officials called for investigations. Investors began pulling their funds. And in her penthouse office, Ms. Whitman stood frozen, reading every word, her empire crumbling beneath her heels. But the final line of the article hit her. Hardest, all evidence provided by former employee Aisha Carter, the woman they tried to silence. In that moment, Aisha didn't just expose a company. She exposed a disease that had been spreading in silence for decades. But she knew power never surrenders quietly. The war had just shifted from the boardroom to the courtroom. The courtroom lights were harsh, bright enough to erase the color from anyone's face. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters whispering, pens scratching against paper. The case of Whitman & Cole versus Aisha Carter had become national news, a story of truth, lies and power colliding in front of the world. Aisha sat at the defendant's table, her posture calm, but her heart beating like war drums. Across from her, Ms. Whitman looked composed as ever. Expensive suit, cold eyes, the perfect mask of control. The company's lawyer, a man with slicked back hair and a voice that could slice glass, stood first. "Your Honor, Ms. Carter illegally accessed confidential data, altered records, and shared proprietary information to defame a reputable organization. This isn't bravery. It's sabotage," the audience murmured. Aisha's lawyer, a firm but gentle black woman named Denise Hall, rose. "Sabotage? My client revealed corruption and racism that your company buried for years. She didn't destroy their reputation. The truth did." Whitman's jaw twitched, but her smile didn't fade. Denise turned to the judge. "We have documentation, digital proof, and testimony from multiple employees. Whitman & Cole exploited the system, faked diversity reports for government grants, and silenced those who spoke out." The judge nodded slowly. "Continue." For hours, evidence poured out, leaked emails, witness statements, and the financial trail Aisha had uncovered. The courtroom felt like a movie. Every word mattered. Every truth cut deeper than the last. When it was Aisha's turn to speak, she stood, her voice steady. "They said I was angry, that I wanted revenge. But all I wanted was respect. All I wanted was to be treated like I belonged in the same room as everyone else. And when I saw what they were doing, how they were lying to the world, I couldn't stay quiet." She turned toward Ms. Whitman. "You said I was just one person, but one person is all it takes to start a fire." The crowd whispered, some nodding, some crying. Then Whitman stood to testify. "You think you're a hero?" she hissed. "You cost hundreds of people their jobs. You ruined lives." Aisha's eyes didn't waver. "No. You ruined them when you chose greed over justice." Whitman's mask cracked for a second, just long enough for the cameras to catch it. That night, news clips of their exchange flooded every screen. The internet divided, some calling Aisha a whistleblower, others branding her a traitor. But deep down, she didn't care anymore. Truth had a voice now, and it was louder than the lies. Days passed, then weeks. The trial dragged on. Evidence mounted higher, and just when it seemed victory was near, something unexpected happened. Denise rushed into the waiting room one morning, face pale. "Aisha, there's a new witness." "Someone we didn't call," Aisha frowned. "Who?" Denise hesitated. "Thomas Reed." Aisha's stomach dropped. "No, he's with them." But when Reed walked into court, his face told a different story. Guilt, exhaustion, shame. He took the stand, voice trembling. "I was part of it," he said. "The fake reports, the denials. We were told to keep minorities in lower positions because it made management more stable." Gasps filled the room. Whitman shouted, "You're lying!" Reed looked at her, eyes wet. "No, Eleanor. I'm finally telling the truth." He handed over files the defense had never seen, signed directives from Whitman herself, proof she'd authorized the cover-ups. The judge's face hardened. "This changes everything." Whitman's expression collapsed. She whispered to her lawyer, then sank into her chair. Aisha sat still, every muscle trembling. After months of fear, betrayal, and loss, the truth was finally standing beside her, not buried under threats and silence. By the end of the week, the verdict came. Whitman and Cole was found guilty of discrimination, fraud, and retaliation against whistleblowers. Ms. Whitman herself faced federal charges. As reporters swarmed her outside the courthouse, microphones flashing, one shouted, "Aisha, what do you have to say now that you've won?" She looked at the crowd, people of every color, every voice, and smiled softly. "This wasn't my victory. It was ours. Every time they said we didn't belong, we proved them wrong. Respect doesn't need a title, only truth." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. For once, she didn't feel small beneath their gaze. She felt infinite, but even as the cheers rose, Aisha knew her story wasn't over. Because the world still held a million silent battles like hers, waiting for someone brave enough to fight them. And now, she wasn't afraid anymore. The world moved fast after the verdict. But for Aisha, it felt like time had finally caught up with justice. Her name was no longer whispered in dark offices or buried under confidential memos. It was now printed across headlines. "Black woman wins historic case against corporate racism." For a moment, she didn't know how to breathe. It wasn't about fame. It was about finally being seen. The company that once treated her like she didn't belong was now drowning in consequences. Shareholders demanded answers. The CEO resigned for personal reasons. HR scrambled to release diversity statements, all while firing the very executives who ignored Aisha's complaints. And James, the man who once told her, "You're lucky to even be here," he was escorted out by security, the same way he once threatened to have her escorted. Aisha didn't celebrate his fall. She didn't have to. His silence said enough. The world was finally speaking the truth she had screamed into empty halls for years. When she returned to her small apartment, the same one where she used to cry, after long nights at the office, her phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from strangers poured in. "You gave me courage to speak up at work. I'm a young black woman in finance. Your story saved me from quitting. You made me believe that. Silence isn't strength." Each message felt heavier than the last, not because of pain, but because of purpose. One evening, while looking out her window, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this wasn't just about me." The next month, Aisha started something new, a foundation called the Glass Ceilings Project. It helped women of color facing discrimination in corporate America. She met dozens of people with the same haunted look she once wore, people too afraid to fight back. She gave them more than advice. She gave them a weapon she never had: belief. Reporters called her the face of corporate change. But she didn't care about titles. She only cared about truth. Meanwhile, the company tried to recover. They rebranded, hired consultants, changed slogans, but everyone knew Their name had become a symbol of shame, a reminder that even the richest walls can't silence justice forever. Months later, during an interview, a journalist asked her, "Aisha, do you forgive them?" She paused. The room was quiet. "Forgiveness isn't a gift for them," she said softly. "It's a freedom for me. But forgetting? No. Never. Because forgetting means letting it happen again." The video of that interview went viral. It wasn't because she said something loud, but because she said something true. Soon, universities invited her to speak. She walked into those bright stages, not in designer suits, but with the quiet power of someone who survived being broken. She spoke not like a victim, but like a mirror, reflecting back what society chooses to ignore. And every time she ended her speech, she left the same words echoing through the hall. Respect doesn't need a title, only truth. Her voice became the sound of change, not just in offices or boardrooms, but in the hearts of those who finally believed they deserved better, because Aisha didn't just win a case. She started a movement. Months turned into a year, and Aisha's story had become something larger than herself. Everywhere she went, people recognized her, not for her pain, but for her power. She was invited to conferences, podcasts, even to Capitol Hill to discuss workplace equity. Yet, behind every camera flash, she remembered the day she was told, "You don't belong here." That memory stayed with her, not as a wound, but as fuel. The Glass Ceilings project grew faster than she imagined. It began with 10 women in a small rented office. Now it had hundreds of volunteers across the country. They offered legal aid, mentorship, and emotional support for employees facing racism and sexism in corporate America. Aisha had become a leader, though she never asked to be one. One evening, she sat in her office long after everyone left. The city lights blinked through the tall windows. She glanced at the framed photo of her parents on her desk, both factory workers who sacrificed everything for her education. She whispered, "I hope I made you proud." Her assistant, Jordan, a young black intern she had hired after hearing his story of workplace bullying, knocked gently. "Ms. Taylor, you should get some rest," she smiled. "You sound like my mother." Jordan hesitated, then said, "Can I tell you something? When I first joined this program, I thought people like you didn't exist. People who actually win." Aisha looked at him, her eyes soft. "Winning isn't about courtrooms, Jordan. It's about walking into a place that tried to break you, and still standing tall." He nodded, emotion catching in his throat. "Then I'll stand tall too." After he left, Aisha's phone buzzed. It was an anonymous email, a whistleblower from her old company. It read, "They're still covering up racial bias in hiring." "They didn't change it, they just changed faces." Her chest tightened. So it wasn't over. The system hadn't learned. It had only hidden. The next morning, Aisha met with her board members. "We're expanding," she said firmly. "We're going to expose corporations that pretend to change but still silence people." One of them asked, "Are you ready for that kind of fight again?" Aisha smiled faintly. "I was born ready." News broke weeks later. Whistleblower partnered with Aisha Taylor to expose corporate hypocrisy. The internet exploded with support, but this time, the corporations pushed back hard. They tried to discredit her, calling her angry, divisive, unprofessional. But Aisha stood her ground. On live TV, she said, "Every time a black woman speaks truth, they call her angry. Maybe they're just scared. Scared that her words might actually change something." That clip spread like wildfire. And this time, people listened. Other workers came forward. Laws changed. HR departments rewrote their policies under public pressure. The same boardrooms that once closed their doors to Aisha now quoted her speeches in their diversity meetings. Late one night, scrolling through messages from women she'd never met, each thanking her for giving them courage, Aisha felt tears rise. But these weren't tears of pain. They were the kind that come when you realize you turned your scars into seeds, and those seeds were now growing everywhere. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning, because for Aisha Taylor, The fight was no longer just about one woman's justice. It was about rewriting the story of what power looked like, one truth at a time. By the second year, the Glass Ceilings Project wasn't just a foundation anymore. It was a force. Media called it a revolution in heels. Politicians, corporations, and activists debated Aisha Taylor's name on national TV. Some praised her. Others feared her. But Aisha didn't care about the noise. She cared about the people. Every week, she visited workplaces that had implemented her equity model, a system designed to ensure fair promotions, pay transparency, and anonymous reporting. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Still, deep down, Aisha knew that progress always came with resistance. One afternoon, as she prepared for a major televised interview, her lawyer walked in with a grim expression. "Aisha, we've got a problem." She turned from the mirror. "What kind of problem?" He sighed. "Your old company filed an appeal. They're claiming defamation and emotional damages. They want to drag you back into court." Aisha froze. "After everything?" "They say your activism is costing them millions. They want to silence you." For a moment, the room felt heavy. The past, those endless nights of fear, humiliation, and isolation, flashed before her eyes. But then she exhaled, slow and steady. "Then we'll go back," she said calmly. "But this time, I won't be the only one standing." The interview that evening was supposed to be about workplace equality. Instead, it became a live confrontation. The host asked, "Ms. Taylor, how do you respond to the lawsuit? Are you ready to face them again?" Aisha leaned forward, her voice firm. "Ready? I've been ready since the day they told me my name didn't belong on their door." Her words sent shockwaves through social media. Within hours, hashtags like "Stand with Aisha" and "Ha Truth Has No Price" trended across platforms. Celebrities, lawyers, and ordinary people rallied behind her. But the corporate world fought back harder this time. Smear campaigns, fake articles, and trolls trying to twist her story. They said she was milking victimhood. They said she wanted attention, and still, she stood tall. At the new trial, the same cold conference room smell filled her lungs. The same kind of lawyers, white suits, fake smiles, tried to intimidate her. But this time, she wasn't alone. The courtroom was filled with women, black, brown, white, all holding signs. "We are Aisha." Her old boss, Thomas Reynolds, was on the stand now. The man who once smirked as she packed her things looked small, trembling under oath. Aisha watched quietly as the truth unfolded again. The hidden emails, the racist messages, the deliberate sabotage. Only this time, the world was watching too. And when the judge dismissed the company's claim as baseless, Aisha didn't cheer. She just looked at Thomas and said softly, "You tried to bury me. You forgot I was the soil." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as she stepped into the sunlight. The crowd erupted in applause, but she didn't raise her hands like a victor. She placed one over her heart and whispered, "This isn't victory. This is proof." That night, as she sat by her window again, city lights glowing below, she finally allowed herself to breathe. She realized that what began as one woman's fight had become something unshakable, a movement that no lawsuit could silence, because truth once spoken aloud never dies. It echoes, it spreads, and in that echo, millions found their voice. Aisha smiled faintly. "Let them come again," she said to herself. "They'll never understand. I don't fight for revenge anymore. I fight for justice." And for the first time, she felt peace. Not because the world was fair, but because she had become the storm that made it listen. A year later, Aisha Taylor stood on the stage of a packed auditorium in Washington, D.C. The banners behind her read, "National Summit on Workplace Equality." Thousands filled the seats, CEOs, journalists, students, and everyday people who had followed her journey. As the applause faded, she looked out at the crowd and smiled softly. Her voice, steady yet full of emotion, echoed through the hall. I once stood in a boardroom where no one looked like me, where people thought silence was the price of success. But I learned that silence doesn't protect you. It only protects those who harm you. The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. She continued, I was called ungrateful. I was called angry. I was told to know my place, and for a while I did, until I realized that my place wasn't at their table. It was building my own. The crowd erupted into applause. Cameras flashed, but Aisha didn't speak for them. She spoke for every person who had ever swallowed their truth to survive. Her speech continued, weaving through pain and triumph. She shared how the Glass Ceilings Project had helped thousands. Workers who'd been silenced, women who'd been overlooked, men who'd been stereotyped. The program had expanded internationally now, offering mentorships and scholarships for underprivileged youth, but she also spoke of what came next. We've changed policies, but now we must change hearts, she said, because no law can force empathy. No rule can teach respect. That begins with each of us. A soft murmur spread through the crowd, people nodding, some wiping tears. Then, in the front row, Aisha spotted a familiar face. Thomas Reynolds, her former boss, sat quietly among the attendees. Older now, humbled, listening. Their eyes met for a brief moment. He didn't look away. He simply nodded, and Aisha nodded back. Not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement. He had seen her humanity now, something he once refused to see. After the speech, reporters surrounded her. Aisha, what's next for you? Politics? A book? A new company? She smiled. No titles, no labels, just truth. My fight was never about power. It was about people. Later that evening, she walked outside into the crisp night air. The city skyline shimmered, lights blinking like stars scattered close to Earth. She looked up and whispered, Mama, Daddy, we made it. She thought about the girl she once was, tired, unheard, afraid to speak up. That girl was gone now. What stood in her place was a woman carved from resilience, and as she stood there, a young woman approached her, nervous, clutching a folder. Ms. Taylor? I just wanted to say, because of you, I didn't quit my job. I spoke up, and they listened. Aisha smiled warmly and placed a hand on her shoulder. Good, she said. Now go make sure they keep listening. The girl nodded, eyes shining, and walked away into the crowd. Aisha turned back toward the city, her reflection glowing faintly in the glass building behind her. A symbol of what once tried to contain her, now reflecting her strength instead, and with a soft, steady voice, she said the words that had become her legacy, words that every listener would remember long after the story ended. Respect doesn't need a title, only truth. The city lights flickered like applause, and somewhere, deep in the hearts of those who once felt powerless, something shifted, quietly, permanently, because one woman's courage had become everyone's reminder that no system is too strong, no lie too loud, and no voice too small to change the world.